Hello, my name is Andrew Macklin, and I am one of the trainers here at Aspire Leadership, delivering training on line management, influencing communication skills, leadership, and presentation skills. I'm also a registered career development practitioner and qualified coach. By the end of this session, I hope that you'll leave with 3 to 4 small intentional actions that you can take right now to feel more engaged and in control of your career without ever leaving your current role. So let's jump in. Our first slide is sort of representative a little bit for me of a career client that I was working with recently. They liked the organization they were in, they liked the people they were working with, and the type of work that they were on as well. But there was something just a little bit askew for them, this feeling that things weren't necessarily matching up for them, that things were a little bit off. And the metaphor that they used for this was the idea of a messy desk. And so this next slide that we're going to show kind of brought me to where I wanted to be with them. It made me think a little bit of, well, not that I was suggesting they should simply tidy up their desk. I'm not a tidy sort of person. I exist and work well in organized chaos. But what this image represented to me in terms of their modeled office was the kind of Chinese art of feng shui. The fundamental principle is that our environment plays a big part on our subjective experience, how we feel about ourselves. And by making small intentional shifts in our environment, not big shifts, small ones, that can have a knock-on effect in terms of our subjective experience as well. And the reason why I think this is so important for us in our careers is that I think that our focus can often move solely to those bigger career shifts and changes, moving to a new organization, getting that promotion, being on that ladder. And I think when our focus is on that exclusively, actually we miss some of these smaller shifts that we know have a big knock-on in terms of fulfillment and satisfaction. Fundamentally, you don't have to move from where you are to experience a shift in your careers. If you haven't heard of career crafting, forgive yourself. It's usually lost in the annals of career theory. But I think this definition does a good job at giving us a sense as to what it's about. So the proactive process of shaping your job, tasks, and relationships at work and your sense of meaning so that your environment better fits your strengths, values, and needs. There are lots of benefits towards career crafting that we know from research as well. We know it makes a big shift in terms of your subjective well-being, in terms of how fulfilled people feel in the workplace. It has an interesting knock-on too in terms of objective success. It turns out when we are feng shuiing our careers in this way, it tends to lead towards some of those financial gains and promotions as well. So no matter who you are, if you've been in your role a long time, a short time, or actually if you might just be here to think about the careers of others and how you might manage those, career crafting has got a lot of payoffs to offer. Now, our next principle of feng shui comes in the form of this next slide, which for me, I think represents a big thing that we miss in our careers. One of my second principles of feng shui, and if you research it, it points to the idea that one of the first things that you can do when you're feng shuiing your house or your room is look for the big, obvious, ugly stuff to begin to make a shift with that as well. Now, for me, this bentwood chair is a thing of beauty, but I think we can agree, functionally speaking, it's a little bit too big for this room. In terms of our careers, what I notice working with individuals and organizations is that when our focus goes solely to the larger things in our careers, the more obviously visual ones around finance, as I said before, we miss some of these subtle things. But there are some big chairs, so to speak, in our careers that when we feel a little misaligned, when we feel a little adrift, that's often symptomatic of one of these bigger chairs missing. So I'm going to talk about some of the psychological aspects of our careers, and 3 of them in particular, that when they are present, we know from research and theory, lead to more fulfillment and satisfaction and vitality in our work and lives. And when they're absent, can begin to lead to the opposite. The first is this idea and concept of relatedness or belonging. So fundamentally, how can you create a sense of connection or community either inside your work or outside of it. The second was around this idea of autonomy. How can you create in your work a better fit for your values and also for your long-term career aspirations? More on that in a moment. We'll come back to it. And the last of these three big areas is the idea of competence. How can you create more of a space or bring into your work more of your strengths and skills? Those are the big three invisible parts of our career satisfaction that we don't tend to see but notice when they're missing, and they're crucial for career crafting. But it's time for me to introduce you to another member of the team. This is a colleague of ours at Aspire Leadership, someone that's been a long-term inspiration for myself for many reasons. But fundamentally, it's the way in which they go about their work. So this next slide is an introduction to the member of our team known as Nacho. Nacho is our office dog. Now, as you can see here, Nacho is obviously a vigilant protector of the space, but also knows exactly how to make themselves comfortable in the workplace. Now, what Nacho is doing instinctively here is making themselves feel at home and comfortable where they are by being attuned to their preferences. And I want us to hold on to that idea because it's core to career crafting. So I'm going to walk us through those three big invisible parts of our careers and give us some details for each one to help us make it feel both a little bit more at home, like Nacho, but also having an eye on developing our long-term careers as well. So, in terms of relatedness and belonging, here's my offer. Make work your kind of social. How do I go about doing that? Well, first could be to instigate some social practices that feel comfortable for you. Maybe you love baking. If you do, I need to be your friend because I love the results of baking, but I'm not a great baker. If you love baking, it might be about creating that little 20, 30-minute meeting once a month or once a week where you share some of that. And it's just a moment of time to connect with other people in the workplace. Maybe it's the pub quiz on a Friday that actually, if everyone met up, would just give you that sense of connection, build that sense of community in your workplace to make you feel a little bit more comfortable where you are. Maybe that type of social life is just too much for you in terms of work. And my offer then would be, what would be a small 5 or 10 minute interaction that you could create on a kind of a ritual basis, every week or two, checking with somebody in the office just to see how they are. Think back over the last week or two of someone who just checked in on you and just register what the impact of that on you was. So a small thing, but begins to make a big difference in terms of our career satisfaction and fulfillment. In terms of autonomy, how can you make your work a more comfortable fit? Now, I think about this as the idea of how do you remove the stone from the shoe in your day-to-day work? So, how can you redesign some of the tasks that you do regularly just to be a better fit for you? If you're anything like me, you become habituated to the things that you do all the time. And even if they don't fit you so much anymore, you still just do them because, well, you've always done them. So tuning into some of your preferences, some of your interests, how can you begin to redesign some of those tasks? So you're doing more of the things that you're interested in that engage you, and perhaps moving over some of the tasks that no longer particularly interest you in the ways that they did at one point. The next I want to offer in terms of autonomy is the idea of how can you go about negotiating a bit more room and flexibility in the workplace. Now, Nacho doesn't negotiate when they sleep, they just sleep. That's not my recommendation for us as employees in our workplaces, but many members of our team do take afternoon naps as well. How can you go about bringing in your preferences, bringing in what works for you now, and creating some room for that? If you know that actually you work best between 10 and 12 in the morning to create some deep work for yourself, how can you communicate that to the people that are around you to let them know that that is something that works for you or that works for you now that you can begin to develop some time around as well? In terms of autonomy, my last offer here is the idea of leading, everyday leadership. A big part of autonomy is how you can bring your voice into the work that you do. So, subtle ways of doing that might be just to offer to chair the next meeting that you're at. It could be about offering to lead on a particular project. Um, what these do for us is it allows us to tune into that career resource of leadership that is going to fuel our careers long term as well. It's an opportunity to learn more about who we are as well as engaging with the people that we work with too. That does lots for us in terms of our confidence and competence as well. Two other points I want to lean into on the idea of relatedness. I'm going to jump back into that before moving forward because I think these are particularly helpful. One, in terms of the people that we're working with and the community we want to create, is the idea of mapping out your career allies. Who are the people around you that really inspire you in the workplace, either by what they do or how they do it? And how can you bring yourself into their orbit a little bit more? One thing that we know about understanding what is going to be a good fit for us in the future is by looking at the things that currently inspire us. And often that's about the people around us as well, either what they're doing or how they're doing it. That's often the first signals we get about the things that we're becoming more interested in. And to extend on that, is there an opportunity for any formal or informal mentorship? Lots of organizations run the formal kind, but plenty of people do it in an informal way as well. If there's an area of the work or the organization that you're in that you feel like, I don't know if it's for me, but I'm curious about it, is there room to have a conversation with somebody who's working in that area just to say, look, I'm interested in this. I'd love to have a conversation to find out a bit more about what it's like and, if it might be a good fit for me at some point in the future. My last of the big three, and how we can use it on a day-to-day basis, is this idea of competence. And my offer here is, how can you make your work your practice ground? How can you take the day-to-day experiences you have in the workplace and use them as a way of bringing in and exploring more of your own strength and potential? Here's three ways I think that you can do that. One is to create more space and opportunities for your own strengths. Careers is something I'm deeply passionate about. It's also something that I've spent a lot of time thinking and training in it as well. And when we set up these webinars, I was one of the first to kind of say, do you know what? I'd love to talk about careers. Not something we talk about in depth, but it's a way of raising the sail of that particular strength that I have and just seeing what wind may or may not catch it. So how can you create space or offers that bring in more of that strengths and skills that you want to either show or explore as well? My next is learning. What's got your curiosity? Where can you move within the organization just to learn a little bit more, either in terms of a knowledge base or in terms of a skill? There's often lots of opportunities right around us to develop some of the skills that are going to facilitate our careers long term as well. I've already mentioned leadership as being one of them. It might be about management, it might be about data, it might be about whatever it is for you. So where is there already an opportunity where perhaps you could inquire about opportunities to learn, either formally or informally? And my last, in terms of competence and how you can stretch your own potential, is exactly that: stretch. How can you take what you already know and apply it in a different area of the business? Maybe you've got a piece of particular expertise in one area, but actually you've never presented on that particular topic before. Is there an opportunity for you to stretch into that way as well? What we know happens to us when we do this is it helps us remind ourselves of our own strengths, our own sense of competence, and shifts what we know to be possible for ourselves, shifts our own expectations about ourselves and our own careers. And those play fundamental parts on our long-term career success as well. Now, those are my offers in terms of ways in which you can use the idea of feng shuiing your career on a day-to-day basis by making those very small shifts that often have a ripple effect. For my client, they did a number of things off the back of this. One was they joined a choir. So they didn't shift anything in terms of the relationships within the organization, but they found a way of creating community outside of it that also created a bit of a safe haven for them outside of work in any way, shape, or form. So they clearly kind of segregated off this little space that created that sense of community for them. In their world of work, people working hybrid, it's hard to create that sense of community in the way that they wanted. They also had a lot of investigatory conversations with peers about what they could learn, what the options were, and that led them to the idea for this client about leadership. Now, there may or may not be a leadership role emerging within the organization in the future, but there's definitely other possible futures for them where that as a skill might come in greater depth. So they've started a bit of an informal mentorship with a particular colleague in their place of work just to explore that option as well. Which brings us to our last of my Feng Shui principles, which is this. And if you're not currently doing this, don't worry, you don't have to be Feng Shui. The last principle is the idea of wherever you're sat in the room to be facing the door. Because in Feng Shui, and to keep the doorway clear, in Feng Shui, the belief is that the doorway is the portal for opportunity, both opportunities coming towards you and you moving out towards opportunities. Which brings us to our last slide before I begin to unpick this a little bit. This idea of connecting with opportunities and being on the forefront, both in terms of keeping our awareness open to what's present around us, and also actively going for it in terms of instigating some of these practices, is fundamental to how our satisfaction day to day works and also our long-term career fulfillment. This is a quote by one of my favorite researchers in career theory, Hermione Ibarra, who is an organizational psychologist, works currently at the London Business School. And what I think this quote does is points towards the thing that often keeps us static in our careers, which is the idea that I need to wait for this bolt of lightning or this big opportunity that's going to point the direction for me. Hermione Ibarra, after more than 20 years worth of research and speaking on careers, highlights a different route that ties in with our career crafting and Feng Shuiing. What Hermione suggests is actually the way in which we find the direction of our careers is through career crafting, through these small experiments that we make on a day-to-day basis, because what they do is they connect what we're interested in to other people who can connect us to opportunities. It also allows us to learn more about who we are and who we are becoming as well. And that's a step in our career fulfillment that we can't go without. So if you found yourself feeling a little bit adrift, not sure where you should be going, Hermione Ibarra's offer, and I love how she speaks about this, the phrase she uses is, take some time to flirt with your future possible selves. There's lots of possible things you could be doing in your life and your career. So take the opportunity to make experiments and flirt with them. This is the only place in terms of the workplace where I would suggest flirting. But I'm down with how Hermione Ibarra suggests this. So my offer in terms of what we've talked about today is there's a lot in there, absolutely. What we know works really well in terms of a ripple effect is choosing just one to begin with. That's often what begins the kind of cascade of further curiosity, further thinking, and opens that door towards, well, what else is possible? So choose one for yourself. Which area from autonomy, from competence, from that sense of community and belonging, what is one experiment, no matter how small, taking that stone out of the shoe, can you do over the next week? And just see how it feels, what connects for you. And my offer with that is, as a part of whatever it is you do, also make it a conversation where you share with someone what you're doing and why you're doing it. What we know about success long-term in careers is that the more people who know what we're interested in, why we're interested in it, the more that has a knock-on effect in terms of our careers long-term as well. People talk, people share what others are interested in. So those are my offers.